Hey string players, if you're like me and you live in the northern hemisphere, it's about the middle of fall right now and soon we'll be going into winter, so the temperatures are only getting colder and colder and we want to protect our instruments. Why do we want to protect our instruments? Our traditional string instruments are made out of wood, which is actually hygroscopic, which means that it attracts and absorbs moisture. So in higher humidity, the wood swells, and in lower humidity, the wood shrinks. We want to avoid the wood moving as much as we can, because that movement and that shifting is going to damage the instrument and it'll make us need repairs. Changes in humidity can cause problems like buzzing, open seams, wood cracking, collapsing bridge, needing to tune your instrument more, and these are all things that we want to avoid. If you enjoy this video and you get some helpful tips from it, please give it a like, and if you have any tips that you'd like to share, please leave them down below, or if you have any questions, ask them down below and I will either answer them for you or I will find an answer for you if I don't already know it. In general, our string instruments like about the same temperature and level of humidity that we do. So that's about 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit and around 40 to 60% humidity. Our instruments feel temperature changes just like we do, so if you're not comfortable, your instrument probably isn't either, and you want to get it into an environment that you would also be happy in for a long period of time. Thankfully, our instruments are made with hide glue, which actually protects the wood from cracking. So hide glue cracks before wood does, so if the glue on your instrument breaks or has any kind of damage, take it in, because that's a sign that the wood would be next. So that glue is a nice protection for our wood. What can we do to protect against cold weather? Hygrometers measure the level of humidity in the air, and it can be very helpful to get one. Some cases have one built in, but they're not always the most accurate. So if you do have a regular hygrometer, you might want to stick it in your case for a little bit and monitor how close the two hygrometers read, just to see how accurate the case one is. I like to have a hygrometer in the room that I leave my instrument in the most, just to monitor the humidity levels. So I like to make sure that the humidity levels stay the same and don't fluctuate, because that fluctuation is what can harm our instruments the most. So if you are able to get a hygrometer, try monitoring the places that you take your instrument the most. So if that's just one room in your home, then that's easy. You just leave the hygrometer there and monitor those levels. See if you're reaching any extremes or if it's pretty consistent. Take it to practice rooms, concert halls, anywhere that you might be taking your instrument, leave it in the case just to see what that is, and then also monitor to see what levels your instrument sounds the best in. So some instruments do better in a bit lower humidity and some do better in a little higher humidity. So just seeing what your instrument prefers can be very helpful. So if the room that you generally leave your instrument in or your case has higher humidity, you might want to invest in a dehumidifier, and if it has lower humidity, you might want to invest in a humidifier, and that can change depending on the seasons. So during the summer months when it's very humid outside, you might need a dehumidifier inside, and in the winter you might need a humidifier because it's so dry outside. So let's talk about humidifiers. I don't recommend getting warm mist humidifiers because they can actually cause mold to develop inside your instrument, which you absolutely do not want. I do recommend evaporative humidifiers, which work by evaporating water off the air filter and then releasing it into the air. I also recommend ultrasonic humidifiers, which work by using fast vibrations to suspend the water particles in the air. These ultrasonic humidifiers are a little quieter, but the evaporative humidifiers work a little stronger. If you're still regularly transporting your instrument around, then leaving it in the case for as long as possible will really help your instrument acclimate to the different environments that you're exposing it to. So leave it in the case for as long as you can, and then after a while crack the case open, so just unzip it basically, and then leave it like that for a little bit, and then, slowly expose it to the new environment. Opening up your case too slowly can actually produce condensation on the instrument depending on what environment you're in. So definitely let it sit for a little bit, just relax, get used to wherever you're going to have rehearsal or a concert, and just let your instrument acclimate very slowly. You can get a humidifier for inside your case, and they can be very helpful, but you should note that if your instrument is going from a very humid environment inside the case to a drier environment outside the case, then the extremes are going to be very extreme, and you want to make sure that across the board it's about equal humidity. So you don't want to bring your instrument from a very humid case to a very dry space. One type of case humidifier is the Dampit. This is what it looks like. This is made for the viola. They make them for every string instrument. The way you use this is you rinse it under water, just take it to the sink or a water fountain, get it all wet. It'll fill up this little sponge inside, and then dry it off. You don't want to stick it inside your instrument while it's still damp on the outside. That will harm your instrument. Dry it off and then just stick it in the F-hole, and then it'll humidify from the inside of your instrument, and it's very helpful inside the case. But then once you take it out of the case, then it's kind of going to try to humidify the entire room, which is going to be much harder. So I generally only use this when my instrument is inside the case or inside a bag, which I will talk about in a second. But if I am in a very, very dry space, I will sometimes play with it inside my instrument. One thing I really love to use is a silk instrument bag. Mine is from Carmen Bruna Designs, and I absolutely love it. I'll link their shop and Instagram down below because they post really, really beautiful product photos on their Instagram. If you're interested, I'd suggest taking a look there first to find out what you might be interested in buying, just because their product photos are so beautiful. So I put my viola in this bag every time I put it in the case. It's just an extra layer of protection because there can be small cracks in between the zipper and it can cause drafts, so adding a bag adds another layer of protection for your instrument. Silk is the best fabric to choose because it's tightly woven and it'll provide the best protection. You can also use a tightly woven cotton, but silk generally has the best results. In the winter, we turn on our heat, and since the winter air is so dry, the heat we pump into our homes is also dry, so we want to humidify that and add the moisture back in. So I like having a humidifier right by the heater or any kind of heat source that you might have, just to immediately make that air more moisturized. We want to keep our instruments away from heat sources because that warm, dry air is not good for our instruments, and going from more humidified spaces to right in front of a dry heat source is the kind of fluctuation that we want to avoid. So let's talk about the absence of heat. You do not want to leave your instrument in a cold car or any kind of cold, dry space for too long. Like a few minutes is okay, but if you wouldn't be comfortable somewhere for 5 to 10 minutes, neither would your instrument. So don't leave it in a car, especially overnight. If you do, though, bring it inside, leave it in the case for as long as you can, and very, very, very slowly acclimate it so that there are no harsh, huge changes. Try to remove rosin dust from your instrument every single time you play. I keep a microfiber cloth in my case. My dad got it for $1 at a car show, and it's really, really dirty. I really need to wash it. But I just wipe my viola down after every practice session and rehearsal. I've made it a habit to always do this, and it's really, really helped keep up the quality of my viola. So when you have a buildup of rosin on your instrument and the humidity is raised, the rosin dust can become moist and it will adhere to your instrument. So that can affect the look, sound, and the long-term condition of your instrument. So it just takes a few seconds to wipe down your instrument after every time you play, and I would definitely make it a habit to do that. We can't always control our environment, and of course we can't control how our instrument will react. So here's what we can do if something bad does happen. An open seam is where the seam of your instrument becomes unglued and kind of comes apart. Your instrument will sound weird. The sound might not vibrate as well, and it might sound a little muffled. If you think you have an open seam but you can't find it, lightly knock around the edges of your instrument. If you have an open seam, it'll sound a little different than the rest of the instrument. If you do find one, avoid playing and take your instrument into a luthier. Buzzing can happen when the bridge is lowered and the strings are then closer to the fingerboard. This happens when basically the body of the instrument goes from like this with more humidity to kind of contracting and getting lower, and then the bridge of course falls as well. Some large instruments like basses have adjusters on the bridge to raise and lower the height of the strings, and you can use these to adjust the height of the bridge to avoid that buzzing. If your instrument is repeatedly going out of tune and you're tuning it over and over again, check the level of your bridge, because when we tune sharper, it'll tend to go like this, and when we tune flatter, it'll tend to go like that. So always take a look at your bridge and make sure it's standing at a nice 90-degree angle. And if it's leaning too far, it's at risk of collapsing. And when your bridge collapses, it's very likely that your sound post will collapse as well, because the sound post relies on the tension from the bridge to stay standing up. If this happens, take it in right away. Don't try to fix it yourself. This requires an expert to fix. The location of the sound post greatly affects the unique sound of your instrument, so you do not want to try to put it in place unless you are trained to do so. So string wear and tear isn't unusually bad, but just know that if you're tuning your instrument over and over again, the strings are going to wear out faster than they normally would. So it's always good to have an old pair of strings or a backup pair, any kind of extra strings that you have on hand with you wherever you go, just in case a string does wear out and break. It's also important for humans to stay healthy during the winter, especially this year. I won't go into 2020 specifics right now, but we want to still be playing at our best even in the cold months. Keep your fingers warm and moisturized. So when you're outside, wear gloves to keep your hands warm and from getting too dry, and even right before you play, if you're in a colder space and your fingers feel really cold, you can always just throw on a pair of gloves and kind of warm your hands up with some friction. Keep your hands moisturized too. I can't play after putting on lotion for about at least an hour. But in the colder months, I like to put on lotion every night just to keep up on it and keep my hands from getting too dry. And then if they do feel especially dry, I will put lotion on if I'm not planning on playing within the next hour or so. If you have a violin hickey or anything, try adding moisturizer to that as part of your skincare routine. In the colder months, if the spot on my neck is getting super dry, I will just throw my moisturizer down there as well, just to keep up on it, because with all the rubbing from your instrument, it's likely to get dry and really irritated during the cold months. My last tip is to stretch your muscles before you play. So our joints like warmth, and when we stretch slowly before playing, it'll warm our muscles up and make it easier to start moving and less kind of jarring on your body. So do some light stretches or some yoga just to get your muscles ready to play. Those are my tips for protecting your string instrument from the cold weather. Let me know if you have any extra tips or if you have any questions. I'll be happy to help you figure out the answers. I put out new videos every Sunday at noon Eastern time, so I would love it if you would subscribe so that you can keep up with my content.